Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Let's get into it now. China says it's dealing decisively with intensified protests across the country. Strict lockdown restrictions over the weekend. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijiang says the country is following dynamic zero-COVID policy, and the government has been making adjustments based on the reality on the ground. He further said in a briefing this afternoon, "We believe that with the leadership of the Communist Party of China and the support of all the Chinese people, our fight against COVID-19 will be successful."
There have been more protests over the weekend as hundreds of people take to the streets over China's stringent COVID restrictions. The protests spread to cities across the country, including the capital, Beijing. The wave of disobedience is unprecedented in mainland China since President Xi Jinping assumed power a decade ago, as frustration mounts over his signature zero-COVID policy nearly 3 years into the pandemic. The COVID measures are also exacting a heavy toll on the world's second-largest economy. Chanting slogans, protesters have added other demands into the mix, such as freedom of press and speech. Even in Wuhan, where the coronavirus has been said to have originated, large numbers of protesters took to the streets. This video obtained by Reuters showed hundreds of protesters marching on streets and tearing down barriers surrounding compounds under lockdown. In some footage, dozens of uniformed policemen locked arms to form a line facing off the protesters, chanting slogans and singing the Chinese national anthem. Over in Shanghai on Sunday, police detained protesters. A fire on Thursday at a residential high-rise building in the city of Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang region, triggered the protest after videos of the incident posted on social media led to accusations that lockdowns were a factor in the blaze that killed 10 people, but the government denies this. People jostled with the police trying to disperse them. People held up blank sheets of paper as an expression of protest.
She will never die! Democracy will never die!
Chanting from Sydney to Shanghai, "Democracy will never die," about 200 protesters gathered outside Sydney Town Hall earlier today to show support for people protesting China's stringent COVID restrictions.
I've come down here to support all Chinese people here in Australia and all Chinese people in Shanghai, at Foxconn, at Urumqi, the Uyghur Muslims, to say that workers in China deserve freedom, they deserve democracy, they deserve fair pay. And as a worker here in Australia, I stand in support of all workers across the world. And we as Australians have to be a voice for China.
And even in London, all in a show of solidarity.
This is a protest and a vigil in solidarity with the people who were killed in the fire in Urumqi in Xinjiang, where because of the zero-COVID lockdown and because of the bureaucratic control of the government, the fire engines couldn't actually get to put out the fire, and as a result many people died, and also the fact that, for example, the fire exits were sealed as part of this brutal zero-COVID policy.
In the meantime, China's western Xinjiang region has loosened some COVID restrictions in its capital.
Not only has security been tightened in Shanghai, China, even in the capital, Beijing, reporters on the ground said today that there have been no signs of new protests. 3 years after the coronavirus emerged in the central city of Wuhan, China remains the only major country not treating COVID-19 as endemic, imposing arduous restrictions on the daily lives of hundreds of millions across the country. China has also not approved any Western-made COVID-19 shots, and a Hong Kong study last year found its CoronaVac shot made by Sinovac did not produce adequate levels of antibodies to fight the Omicron variant. Experts say it will be better for China to ramp up its vaccinations before it can contemplate reopening like other countries already have. Well, let's backtrack a little to understand the COVID restrictions in China and why. The directive to impose strict lockdown restrictions comes from China's central government, especially in areas where COVID-19 has been detected. Tens of millions of people have been lying under some kind of lockdown since the latest wave of cases emerged In many places, mass testing is carried out and people found to have COVID are isolated at home or placed under quarantine at government-supervised facility. For now, most businesses and schools are closed in China, as are shops to sell food. Also, the lockdowns stay in place until no new infections are reported. More recently, China has seen its first death from COVID-19 in 6 months and recorded 40,052 new cases today. Joining me now is the President Emeritus of the Nigerian community in China, Maxwell Ogbonna. He joins me now from Guangzhou. Thank you so much, Maxwell, for making time. I know it's about midnight where you are, and I really appreciate you joining me today. There have been protests in Guangzhou. Have there been protests in Guangzhou just like in other parts of China? Okay. Well, Maxwell tries to figure that out. We'll move on. The anti-lockdown protests in China struck uncertainty and dented sentiment, sending the yuan, that's the local currency, sliding and pushing nervous investors towards a safe haven greenback as the dollar gained broadly today. Against the offshore yuan CNHD3, the dollar rose 0.76% in early Asia trade to 7,245.6. China looks set to continue with its ultra-strict COVID policies endorsed by the ruling Communist Party, which has heightened fears among investors. President Xi will double down on ideology-driven policies at the cost of economic growth. We'll still return to this conversation about the lockdowns in China, but in other developments, U.S. President Joe Biden will be hosting his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron this week in a rare visit aimed at highlighting Franco-American friendship rather than the bitter economic competition between the two sides. It's been more than a year since the UK and Australia torpedoed a big French submarine contract, pushing Franco-US relations to breaking point. Both countries now hope to put on a show of unity on common threats from Russia and China. The elephant in the Oval Room, however, will be the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. Europeans say the massive subsidy package to U.S. manufacturers could deal a lethal blow to their industries, which are already reeling from high energy prices caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Macron will try to convince the United States it's in their interest not to weaken European companies at a time Western allies are facing intense economic competition from China, which they say uses its economic might as diplomatic leverage.
Well, during the Trump presidency, the European-American, the French-American relation was quite conflictual and difficult, because in the White House was a president who didn't believe in alliance, who undermined NATO every step of the way, even talked about NATO being obsolete, and there was, according to him, a need to move on. He stepped out of the climate agreement on climate. He stepped out of a negotiation on the Iran nuclear program. Everybody remembers that Emmanuel Macron tried to soften somehow Donald Trump, but it didn't work out. The Biden White House is a friendly White House towards Europe. I mean, Biden is an old internationalist, a friend of Europe. He believes in the European. He believes in the European community, and obviously, not everybody is looking eye to eye on everything. But between Biden, the old internationalist, and Emmanuel Macron, who is such a European leader as such, there is a good basis to understand each other.
And China rejected so-called attack by Canada in an attack in the newly released Indo-Pacific strategy and calls on the country to stop what it says is hyping up China's threat theory. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijiang made this known in a press conference today in response to a report that Canada launched its Indo-Pacific strategy, saying that China has logged sullen representations with Canada. China, he says, strongly deplores and rejects the attack and smear campaign targeting China, outlined within Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, that is full of ideological bias, emphasizing that Canada hypes up so-called China threat and makes groundless accusations and attacks against China. He added the international community can see clearly who's safeguarding world peace and promoting common development and who is inciting the Cold War mindset and playing up confrontation. The principle of non-interference in internal affairs is a golden rule that governs interactions between countries. The Taiwan, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong affairs are purely China's internal affairs and allow no interference by external forces. China is firmly determined to safeguard its sovereignty, security, and development interests. We have Maxwell Obuna back joining us now. Maxwell, thank God you figured it out. And thank you for making time to be with us midnight where you are. I appreciate your staying up for this interview. Have there been protests in Guangzhou just like in other parts of China?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. My pleasure to join your program now. My name is Maxwell Obuna. I'm a Nigerian. I'm the President Emeritus of Nigerian community here in China. Yeah. First of all, I wish to, remind us that China has a zero COVID policy now here. And because of that, sometimes people, if there's a new policy, a new rule, people don't take it immediately, okay? And what we call protest, I call it group of people, coming together to express their opinion, about the new policy, about the new rules. But with time, they will get adjusted with the new policy. Is what Chinese government calls zero COVID policy. So that's it. So I see it as some group of people coming together to express their opinions.
So there are no protests where you are. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you don't believe that.
Yeah, what I'm saying, I live in
Yes,
I live in Guangzhou, right, for 20 years now. 20 years now. There are names you can give to things. Some people can call it protest, but I see that group of people coming together to express their opinions. Okay, but if we call it protest, there are some people who call it that way. I see it as some group of people coming together to express their opinions and their maybe frustrations.
Well, you see some of them trying to tackle the police in some of the videos, especially in Shanghai, where there have been arrests of those protesters, people who don't want to be locked indoors. We already know the reason why they're out on the streets, which is the fire that happened in an apartment building in Urumqi. A lot of people say it was because of the restrictions. The emergency services could not reach the people in the building. You don't think that people really want the lockdown restrictions removed or at least weakened, as it has been in Shanghai this morning, as I have learned?
Yeah, exactly. Also, there are some people also in Shanghai who are doing that. But then what do you call lockdown? Okay, I need to, excuse me to use another language for that lockdown, where I can call it quarantine, You see, for example, in China, we have low risk areas and high risk areas of COVID-19. You understand? So if your area is found to be low risk areas, okay, you will be quarantined, maybe 3 days, only 5 days. If your area is found to be high risk area, maybe you'll be quarantined depending on the government. We finish the test, okay? So that's it. For example, the area I stayed, we have low risk places, okay? I am free. My family is free. We can go. My wife go out to buy vegetables and come down, okay? Like to talk about Shanghai, it's a high risk, and they can have what we call quarantine for 5 days. They will go for tests, and if they are found that they are normal, okay, the Chinese government opens the door, and they can go out for their normal businesses.
I want to ask, if the Urumqi incident was ever reported in China.
Yeah, the Urumqi incident was reported here, but then some people claim it's because of the quarantine. But no, I think it's not that. It's a different case that caused that. Even the Chinese authorities and officials affirmed that it was not because of the quarantine that caused. People think, or people say, if there is no quarantine, maybe the people will escape the fire. But it was not because of the quarantine. It's another thing differently, why they were unable to escape. Not because of the quarantine given to them.
What was the reason why they couldn't escape? because I'm trying to understand exactly how the lockdowns work. So hold on. Some people have said, that apartment buildings are actually locked. They're actually under lock and key, where there is a lockdown. So no one is able to go out and no one is able to come in. And some of these areas, you're talking about the low COVID areas and the high COVID areas and so on. And that was the reason why emergency services could not reach those people who needed help in the apartment building in Urumqi.
Look, if there is some high risk area, okay, the government doesn't lock individually a garden or a place or a street, is quarantined, so that may be the reason, not because the apartment was locked, okay.
So why couldn't anybody escape the building though?
It's a building cannot be only 10 people. Maybe it's just a room, okay? If it's a building in China, buildings are so tall and long, maybe 2,000 people, 3,000 people. From the information I heard, the news, only about 10 people, right? So it doesn't mean it's a building. It may be an apartment, a house, not a building. Building in China have 3,000, 4,000 people, the whole building. So that's it. So if you watch the news or read the news...
The story says it was an apartment building that was under fire, but that's fine. You already spoke about the Nigerian community. You say you're free to move around. Your wife is free to move around. I also want to mention something else, that happened during the pandemic years, 2020, between 2020 and 2021, which is that Africans were being denied access to certain public places in China. It caused some rift between the Nigerian government and the Chinese government as well, even though that was cleared up on a diplomatic level. But since you're there, have you noticed any of such activities or any of such attitudes towards Africans and Nigerians, perhaps, in China?
Recently, there's nothing like that, And remember also, when 2 or 3 people, have a case, they tend to generalize it, They tend to generalize it. Recently, there is no form of discrimination against Nigerians or Africans in China. You see, the Chinese people are and foreigners are treated alike, the same, no discrimination from the Chinese government. Myself, I'm here. Nobody has discriminated against me and my family. So, and I have a lot of friends also. They have not complained of discrimination recently.
Thank you so much, Maxwell Ogbonna. I know you're also being careful with how you're portraying this. Hard to believe which side is telling the truth now, but thank you for expressing your thoughts on the program.
That's okay. I think, you see, in any case, the zero COVID policy, Chinese government they care about the life of their citizens. You understand what I'm saying? For example, some people they're concerned about the economic, how they make money, but people forget that life first, okay? You need to have life first before you talk about money, okay? So sometimes we have to weigh the merit and demerits of the action. I think the merit of the zero COVID policy outweighs the demerits. Do you understand? For example, in China, all this while we have COVID-19, only 30,000 people have died. But for example, in a country like America, more than 9 million people have died because of this issue. So I think the Chinese government is trying her best to make sure that the people are safe, and we are safe here. For example, I'm safe here. I think this country is a safe place,
We just want to understand the issue. We're not comparing countries or trying to put China in bad light. We just want to understand exactly what's going on in China. I mean, the videos do portray a protest, but if you say people are just expressing their opinion, it's very much the same thing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Welcome back to more developments in health. The World Health Organization says monkeypox will now be known as mpox, following complaints of a racist and stigmatizing language linked to the virus's name. However, the old term will be used alongside the new one for about a year before being phased out. The Global Health Agency decided on the name mpox after lengthy discussions between experts, countries, and the general public. The WHO says the new name can be used in English and in other languages. Cases of mpox have been reported in 29 countries in Europe, as well as in Canada, Australia, and in the United States, prompting huge demand for a vaccine to protect those most at risk. The WHO declared mpox a global health emergency in July because of the worldwide surge in people developing symptoms including a high fever and skin lesions or rash. Cases have been declining for months now around the world. Here in Africa, if being at a funeral was not enough, mourners had more to grieve about after at least 14 people attending a funeral in the capital Yaoundé were killed by landslide on Sunday. Those who died were part of a group that had gathered to mourn the deaths of several relatives. Dozens of people were attending the funeral on a soccer pitch at the base of a 20-meter-high soil embankment, which collapsed on top of them. One reporter at the scene said he saw 4 large white tents at the hill's summit on the edge of what seemed to be a ridge beyond which the ground had disappeared. The bodies have been deposited in the nearby mortuary, and efforts are continuing to search for more bodies. Yaoundé receives a lot of precipitation, and heavy rains have triggered several devastating floods throughout the country this year.
They were attending a meeting in this place, very dangerous area, when suddenly there was a landslide. That landslide killed 14 people and over 10 others have been taken to the various hospitals. While the search for other probable persons or corpses are still undergoing, the city council is going to send an engine tomorrow, this night even, to come and equally try to see who can find some other things. So for now, we want to tell the population that it's a risky zone to stay, and we are calling on them to liberate the area for now for the police and the gendarmes to do their work, so that by tomorrow morning we'll be able to have a clear report on the situation.
An almost similar thing happened in South Africa's Limpopo province, only this time more than 20 people drowned in rivers and dams following weeks of persistent rains. Authorities say from the beginning of October this year until this week, police have recorded 20 incidents of inquests resulting from drownings, with the number of victims counting more than the incidents. The Provincial Commissioner of Police has called on communities to be wary of rivers and dams, as the continuing rains may raise dam levels and flooded rivers. Over in Somalia, officials reported a while ago that the siege of Villa Reis Hotel in the capital Mogadishu was nearly over, but has not put a figure on the number of deaths. The State Minister for Environment, Adam Al-Hesse, said that after the first deafening explosion, some guests managed to escape via a back door before the attackers, the Al-Shabaab militants, stormed the building. Others, he said, remained in their rooms in different wings of the hotel. The Villa Reis Hotel, which has also been referred to as Villa Rose, is popular with government officials, and several ministers have confirmed being rescued. At least one minister, Mohammed Ahmed, is reported to have been injured, while another has been rescued. East African leaders are back in Nairobi, Kenya, for talks aimed at ending conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Welcoming them, former President Uhuru Kenyatta appealed to all sides to give peace a chance. Last week, regional leaders agreed on a ceasefire following intense fighting between the DR Congo's army and the M23 rebel group in North Kivu province. The situation was reportedly calm over the weekend. A spokesperson for the rebels said they were not invited to attend the latest talks in Kenya. I want to bring in Kenyan journalist Brian Mwenda. He's in the capital, Nairobi. Brian, thanks for joining us on the program. Do we understand why the M23 rebels are not invited to the talks, even though last week they were also not invited to the talks over the same issue? They also rejected the deal that was made last week. How can leaders talk about them and make deals without them present?
Thank you for inviting me yet again. The M23 rebels being invited into the talks is quite an interesting thing, because this is not the first time they have not been invited. Even in the first meeting that was held in April 2022, early this year, in the first inter-Congolese consultative meeting, they were not invited because basically the Congolese delegation was against them joining the peace talks, because again, what happened is, way before the peace talks just started, they received information that the M23 rebels had already started again seizing some of these communities. and they felt they are not going to be comfortable being part of the conversation with them. Another thing is that now also experts, part of the interventions that were laid down by more of the Congolese army was that they were going to assimilate or recruit some of the M23 to their army. But then also experts just came a little bit more strongly and said that that is not the solution. And so the M23 rebels have been seen as a group that is not up to any will to listen up to any of these conversations. One more interesting thing that did also happen today is that the president for Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, also mentioned that these are illegal. These are groups with illegal arms and guns. The same problem is being faced in Uganda, and you can now imagine that with these heads of state in these consultative meetings, they are definitely not going to be so friendly with the M23 rebels in the conversation too.
It's pretty interesting, isn't it? So how does one reach out to the M23 and get them to sit and talk about what it is they want so that the fighting can stop? But have the talks begun, and what are we learning?
So today marked the first day of the Nairobi peace process, the third inter-Congolese consultative meeting here in Nairobi. And quite a number of heads of state did their opening remarks today. And one interesting one came from the president for Rwanda, Paul Kagame, who said that these fights going on in between the M23 rebels and of course the Congolese has a long history, but nonetheless is solvable. He's optimistic that we can find a solution to the same, but also beyond that, he said that he has the political will to make sure that this situation is laid to bed once and for all. But then also in part of the conversation that he had with the with the EAC heads of state through a video call, is that he didn't take ownership of any ownership of Rwanda backing the M23 rebels, right, as has been reported by media. And it's quite interesting. Also, President Uhuru is also the facilitator for the East African led peace, East African community process. He says that, reforms and disarming these M23 rebels should be one of the major interventions that should give the region more long-lasting peace and security. As I also mentioned, Museveni said that he is also up for two ways: the military intervention and political will. These are also two tracks of the peace negotiations between them: political will and also military intervention. Yeah.
Yes, and I know that some of the Congolese in diaspora have said Rwanda needs to be taken out of the conversation because they're part of the problem. Interesting that you say that he didn't address that issue. But coming back to Kenyans now, where you are, what do they think? What do people think of what's going on in the DRC?
Kenya might look quite a distance from Congo in terms of once you look at the map, but then Kenyans are going to be affected if the region is unstable. Once you look into why even these meetings being held in Nairobi, is that, East Africa suffers more if one of the countries or member state of the East African community isn't economically stable, politically stable, and also in terms of security is not stable. And Kenyans are saying, let's find a solution, because again, also it's just less than a month since the ceasefire was announced also in Ethiopia. And once a country is not stable just next to you, you are also not equally stable. And that's why Kenya did give its army up to 900 men did go to Congo. And also Kenya also has once even intervened in Somalia, making sure that its neighbors are also stable, so that also Kenya can also be stable in all directions.
Brian, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thousands of police officers have been protesting in the Belgian capital Brussels today over working conditions and safety concerns after a colleague of theirs was stabbed to death this month. Thomas Monjoie was attacked on the evening of November 10. A Belgian man, 23-year-old Yassine Mahi, has been arrested and charged with murder and the attempted murder of another officer in a suspected terror attack. Police say the suspect, who was known by de-radicalization services, had gone to a police station in the morning of the stabbing, saying he wanted psychiatric help. Police unions say they want tougher response to violence against officers, calling for a real zero-tolerance approach as well as better pay. Representatives hoped to have a meeting with Prime Minister Alexandre Leclerc. Rail workers in Austria have staged a 24-hour strike which shut down all train traffic throughout the country after last-minute pay negotiations fell through. Wedged between 8 countries, including Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Hungary and the Czech Republic, Austria is an important hub for European rail travel. A young woman from Frankfurt in Germany, who gave her name as Julia, said she does not see how she can get to Frankfurt now. She'll probably stay overnight. Another Austrian said he was trying to get back to Salzburg, and he and his friends were unable to find a bus to make them there. Just a few of the reactions to the strike. The main rail workers union had called for a €400 pay rise for the sector's 50,000 employees. Two developments now inside Ukraine. The government has launched the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which will see tons of grain being supplied to African countries in 2023. During a press briefing earlier today, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said the food exports, despite Ukraine needing every resource, including agriculture, and despite attacks on Ukrainian agriculture, will be made possible with the help of international partners who've already raised $50 million. Countries on the list of recipients are Nigeria, Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan, among others, which will be receiving 1 to 10 shipments per month. Mr. Kuleba said Ukraine was doing this based on its experience 90 years ago when former Soviet Republic political leader Joseph Stalin executed a man-made famine in Ukraine. He said memories of that caused the country to promise never to allow a repeat and to resolve to help other countries in need. He said when Ukraine realized the impact the war was having on African countries, it decided to resume its grain exports to feed the 5 million people who need them in Africa. He called on African leaders to support Ukraine, given atrocities committed by Russia in the country and the continuous discovery of mass graves in cities occupied by Russian soldiers. Mr. Kuleba also drew attention to intensified Russian strikes last week, which are likely to continue this week. In the meantime, the Kremlin says the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine is still under Russian control and will remain so after Ukrainian officials suggested Russian forces were preparing to leave. The head of Ukraine's state-run nuclear energy company said on Sunday there were signs that Russian forces might be preparing to vacate Europe's biggest nuclear plants, which they seized in March, soon after invading Ukraine. The Kremlin has dismissed the statement. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters in a briefing, "There's no need to look for signs where there are none and cannot be any." Russia and Ukraine, which both suffered from the world's worst nuclear accident in Chernobyl in 1986, have accused each other of shelling the complex, which has 6 reactors. Both sides have warned of the danger of a nuclear catastrophe. A UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, wants to create a protection zone around the Zaporizhzhia plant. And 2 days after an attack that badly damaged their home in Kherson, a traumatized elderly Ukrainian woman and her son were reconnected to power supplies after months of no gas or electricity. The family's apartment's balcony was damaged also. Windows were blown out, a wall demolished in a Russian strike on a residential neighborhood in the city late on Thursday. Still living in the ruins because they have nowhere else to go, 82-year-old Lumglia Antonenko and her 53-year-old son Alexander spoke of the terror of the attack and their relief at getting electricity and gas restored to their home on Saturday. Kherson was occupied by Russian forces for nearly 9 months, after which Russian forces retreated to the eastern side of the Dnieper River, where they remain in control of the large part of Kherson region. Kherson city itself was recaptured by Ukraine on November 11. Another development, chargé d'affaires of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, Elizabeth Rood, says Russia and the United States have ways to manage nuclear crisis at the level intelligence agencies, adding that for now there are no meetings scheduled. Much earlier this month, the CIA Director William Burns met Sergei Naryshkin, head of Russian foreign intelligence, and warned him about the consequences of any Russian use of nuclear weapons. Russia said the issues discussed were sensitive and declined to comment on them. Ms. Rood said if there is need for another conversation in that channel, it can happen. Russia says after Naryshkin's meeting with Burns, Moscow is open to more high-level talks with the United States, but the Kremlin dismissed the idea of a summit between President Vladimir Putin and President Joe Biden as out of the question for now.
The United States has channels for managing risk with the Russian Federation, particularly nuclear risks. And that was the purpose of CIA Director Burns's meeting with his Russian counterpart. Director Burns did not negotiate anything, and he did not discuss a settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. I'm sure if there's a need for another conversation in that channel, it can happen. There's not anything scheduled that I know of. President Biden is committed to discussing arms control and to determining what the future arrangements will be after New START expires. In the meantime, we will continue to have discussions through the bilateral consultative commission, the mechanism of the New START treaty, and we look forward to when we will be able to resume the strategic dialogue. I can say that the United States continues to talk with Russia through the designated channel about the release of Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan. The United States, as we have said, has put a significant proposal on the table. We have followed up on that proposal, and we have proposed alternatives. Unfortunately, so far, the Russian Federation has not provided a serious response to those proposals. Until such time that we can provide full consular services, Russian citizens may apply for U.S. visas in any country where we have a U.S. embassy. When it comes to immigrant visas, we know that it is difficult for Russian citizens to get to Warsaw, which is the designated place for processing those visas. So we are working towards identifying other locations that could be more accessible. But again, our country is open, and we have ways for Russians to apply for U.S. visas.
Let me clarify, is this a European country, the other option for Russian people to apply other than Poland?
We're trying to identify other locations that would be more accessible for Russian citizens.
Elizabeth Rood, they're talking on a number of issues regarding U.S. Russia relations. Welcome back. A small plane that crashed into high-voltage power lines near Washington, D.C. has been removed by a crane hours after both the pilot and passenger were rescued. Aircraft crashed around 5:30 p.m. local time in misty and wet conditions in Montgomery Village, Maryland, on Sunday. According to the County Fire Rescue Service, it became caught up in live power lines after 100 feet from the ground, disrupting power distribution. Most power in the county has been restored, and 2 hospitals are back at full capacity after early being limited. Washington area utility company Pepco said it had restored electric service for all customers who had been impacted by the incident. The company was continuing to stabilize energy infrastructure at the scene and assessing damage before beginning repairs. Police in Mexico dismantled a migrants' camp set up on the Mexican side of the border with the U.S. on Sunday. They did that for security reasons. Early in the morning, riot police stepped into the camp by around 600 migrants, mostly from Venezuela, in the city of Ciudad Juarez, besides the Bravo River and next to the U.S. border wall. Tensions rose, and officers forced resisting migrants out, facing off against them and pulling tents away. Some tents caught fire during the operation, with police officers pushing them into the nearby river to douse the flames. Ciudad Juarez's government's human rights chief, Santiago Gonzalez, said the move was aimed at preserving the migrant security as there was a risk of fires, drownings, and hypothermia. European police agency Europol says it's helped coordinate the takedown of a cartel managed from the United Arab Emirates, believed to control up to a third of Europe's cocaine trade. Europol released a video it said was shot by partners and showed the operations without giving further details in its statement. Police arrested a total of 49 suspects in raids in Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Spain, and the UAE from November 8th to the 19th. The operation to coordinate raids was dubbed Desert Light and had been planned over a period of 2 years. And Channels Television has won again, adding a 15th feather to its cap from the NMMA Awards. If you're outside the country, you know that that's a Nigeria Media Merit Awards. It's all happened on Sunday night.
It's an evening event to reward hard work and ingenuity in the media landscape, and this year's edition is special. It's the 30th of the series. The trustee chair, a veteran in the industry, shares his experience with the audience as a war journalist himself, but then reflects on the brutal killing of 2 young journalists during the Liberian War. He says journalism is a challenging profession.
Members of the profession have worked assiduously to defend freedom of the press, which provides the oxygen that keeps democracy as a system, its values, and its institutions alive. If free press dies, democracy shall inevitably go with it.
For a 30-year tradition, the pedigree and credibility of the award have been designed and sustained over the years with a list of criteria to guide the assessors.
The level of adherence to rules of the regulatory body, the percentage of local content, response to financial obligations internally and to regulatory bodies, public acceptance and perception of the media house, quality of programming and transmission, quality of reproduction in the case of newspapers, level of professionalism in content, objectivity, fairness, and balance. Finally, industrial harmony within the organization.
Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu is the chief host and was accompanied to the event by a large entourage. He urges the media to exercise a high level of professionalism as they go about their business.
We're in call for great circumspection and great fidelity to the timeless principles of journalism. Accuracy is critical, fairness at all times, balanced reportage, integrity, I imagine, is critical at all times. Your standards must never be lowered for anything, and definitely not in this age in which social media and internet has enabled the easy amplification of fake news and malicious report, hate speeches that are intended to give undue political advantage or to divide our society or even derail this our democracy.
For the Latif Jakonde Prize for Political Reporter of the Year are...
The award nominations are called, most of which are in the print category.
The Punch.
Then the broadcast media. The awards range from the reporter, presenter, producer of the year to the station of the year.
TVC.
NBC Prize for Television Station of the Year.
And the best is saved for the last, the Best TV Station of the Year award.
The winner is Channels Television.
For the champion, stand up, stand up, stand up. For the champion, stand up.
I'd like, on behalf of the chairman
Channels Media Group, Dr. John Momo, and his lovely wife, to say a big thank you to the organizers of this event. We didn't see this coming because we've won this award for 14 times. This is the 15th time we'll be winning this award. We'd like to say that we are dedicating it to the staff of Channels TV, people who have worked so hard for this over the years. This award is for them. I thank you all, and I thank you indeed.
The NMMA has over 1,000 alumni who have been found worthy of recognition for their hard work in various media organizations across different platforms over the years. And for many, this award is a tonic for more work. Dari Idu, Channels Television News.
And as we end the program today, dancers from all over the country flew the capital city, Caracas, in the Sports National Institute Stadium to perform the largest ever Rueda de Casino dance. Rueda de Casino is a style of salsa where couples form a circle and do turn patterns at the same time. Luis Lamo, one of the organizers, said over 2,000 dancers aimed at bringing to Latin America the world record title that now is held in Spain. He said he loved everything there. He loved everyone there. That's according to one of the dancers. Participants did sway to the music the best they could, while onlookers watched with bemusement. We still don't know if they got the world record, though. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching.